you very much. Thank you. Can you all hear me? I guess you can hear me. I have a cold, so I'm being projecting. And also one other thing that I need to ask you, do you all have a handout? Is there anyone who needs one? Wonderful, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to present to you today. I am very excited about this topic, playing your best when it counts. And we all know that there are times that we have to walk on that stage and we have to sit down at that piano and we have to play well, correctly? We have to play well and we have to play with confidence. And I also think that this is a very important topic in the sense that this information that I'm going to give you today, we can impart to our students. And it's for something for them, some knowledge that you can impart to them so that when they are doing their recitals and festivals and competitions and the like, that they are going to have some tools that are given to them to help them play their best when it counts. The teachings that I'm going to share with you today are by a wonderful gentleman by the name of Dr. Bill Moore, who did a presentation about this topic at one of the MTNA national conferences. I can't remember how long ago it was. And I was absolutely fascinated by it. And yet he was the plenary speaker. And he talked for about 90 minutes on this topic. And it was just incredibly fascinating. And I went up to him and I asked him, I said, would you mind if I shared your information to local associations, state associations, and the like? And he said, please do, because he said this is what it's about, you know, sharing to piano teachers, music teachers of all types. And he said, please feel free to do it. And so that's what I'm going to do for you today. So the first thing that I would like to read to you, I think this is absolutely a wonderful quote. It's written by John Minahan, who wrote a book called The Art and Science of Practicing. We call music a performing art, although musicians spend comparatively little time on the stage. The vast majority of a musician's life is spent preparing to perform. We are, in fact, not performers, but practicers who go before the public from time to time. Now think about that. Isn't that the case, usually, for a lot of us? Without a doubt, the most surprising difference between athletes and musicians is not the amount of time spent practicing, but the amount of time spent playing. Most competitive athletes have dozens of performance repetitions over the course of 6 months, while most musicians may have 1 or 2. For the most part, athletes are players who practice, while musicians are practicers who play. This has implications for the way musicians best transfer what is learned in practice, yes, to their performance. Here you go. So think about that. That's true, isn't it? To play your best when it counts, you must simultaneously walk 2 parallel paths. One path for the development and refinement of your technical skills, and the second path for the development and refinement of your mental performance skills. This presentation is designed to help you better understand your mental performance skills, teach you how to practice them, and help you execute them during performance. So that's what we're going to learn today. So the first thing that we're going to start with is the practice mindset, as you see on your handout. And what I refer to the practice mindset is the skills that you need to put it in your brain. I tell my students this all the time. You're programming your computer. You're learning. You're learning the music. But those skills are not the same skills one needs to get that information out and onto this instrument. They're two completely different mindsets. So we're going to start with the practice mindset. What mental skills do you need for the practice mindset? So the first thing we have is self-instruction. Okay? There's three things: self-instruction, self-monitoring, and analyzing mistakes. All right? So self-instruction, during a practice session, while refining technical movement or pattern, you will most likely spend a percentage of your time self-instructing, telling yourself how to move. How am I going to get from point A to point B? All right? Analyzing all of the movements of your hand, arm position, bench height, all of the technical aspects of playing the instrument. You're going to be observing those, spending your time self-instructing, telling yourself how to move. Now, sometimes what happens is that we move incorrectly, and we don't know that we're moving incorrectly. So we're having difficulty playing a particular section on the piano, but we have absolutely no idea why we're doing that. This is where the teacher comes in. And so, for example, if you have a student who's trying to play a scale, very fluidly, and they're doing, that sort of thing, it's like, Mr. Christensen, I can't for some particular reason play that. And I look at them and I'll say, have you bothered to look at your hand? And it's like, oh my God, look at my hand, okay. And it's like, and then you correct that. And so then they go home, and then what they do is they begin to self-monitor those particular moves. I mean, self-instruction. They're instructing themselves to move correctly. Self-monitoring, again, attending to execution of movement patterns and judging them is right or wrong. So sort of, again, it's the same thing. Are my hands moving correctly? Do I have the right hand position in the keyboard? If I'm a vocalist, do I have the proper vocal technique? Am I coloring or shaping the vowel? If I'm playing a cello or a violin, am I playing in tune? Is my vibrato right? All right? So again, we're attending to the execution of movement patterns and judging them as right or wrong. I had a student that I was working with the other day, and she kept telling me, she said, well, I just don't understand why this sounds so notey. And she was sitting at the piano, and she was playing away. I can't remember it was that Mozart, so on and so forth. Stop! You call that Mozart? No, I didn't say that. So the thing is, again, we're working with hand position, and we're working with movement of the hands and the rotation of the wrist and the like, so that she could get a very beautiful sound. Wrist rotation in the Alberti bass. Now you go home and you look at that and, teaching her how to do that and demonstrating it, and then having her play it repeatedly. Okay? Excuse me, glasses. So she's monitoring that in terms of executing the movement, the patterns, and judging them as right or wrong. So, of course, if she's doing this, she knows that it's wrong because it sounds loud and notey. How are you going to fix it? Well, first of all, you got to listen. You got to hear what you're doing, and then you have to apply the proper technique to correct the problem. All right? And then analyzing mistakes. Determining the cause of incorrect movement patterns and the effect of the outcome. So sometimes if the hand is not in the right position in the piano, and you're playing a technical passage in the music, it'll cause mistakes. And then in the pressure of a performance, if you tense up and you don't have that fluidity, then you're going to make the mistake. Okay? And sometimes students will learn something. I'm sure you've all had students that, Mr. Christensen, I went home and I learned this whole sonata by myself. Have you ever had that happen to you? And they walk in the room and they tell you this and you're thinking, oh God, what am I going to hear? Well, sometimes you hear wonderful things and then sometimes you're horrified, right? And then trying to fix that mistake is really a very, very difficult thing to do. And they play wrong notes, and they have no idea those notes are wrong. Isn't that a difficult thing to uncorrect? Yeah. In fact, I told a student yesterday, playing a Chopin etude, and he was adding notes in the left hand, and I said, for God's sake, I said, it's hard enough. Why are you adding more notes? It was one of the tones of the chord. It was an E major chord. Chopin had written G sharp E, and he was putting in a B. And I said, leave that out. And no wonder he couldn't get from point A to point B, because his hands were getting all tangled up. So I said, you're composing again. Don't do that. So those are some of the three most important aspects of the practice mindset. Okay? Self-instruction, self-monitoring, and analyzing your mistakes. Okay? Any questions up to that point? Now let's talk about the performance mindset. This is where we all have to be psychologists. This is a completely different mindset. And I know there are a lot of you out here that have adjudicated. And how many times have you been adjudicating festivals or competitions and the like, and you have the students that are coming out and sitting down and playing the piano, and you're hearing a lot of practicing. You're not hearing performance, right? Because your students are thinking about all of these analytical things, and we don't want them to do that during the performance. We want them to be thinking more in a performance mindset so that the music becomes the music that they're playing is beautiful, artistic, expressive, and they're saying something with it, okay? So here are some things that we can teach our students in regard to performance mindset. The first thing you have to have is courage, right? It takes a lot of courage to walk up on a stage and sit down in front of a room full of people and play, correct? And you have to, what courage is directing your will to overcome self-doubts and fears. That's very important, directing your will to overcome self-doubts and fears. And we all do that. Sometimes before they open up that stage door. Do you all know who Heidi Lawalder is? Have you ever heard of her? Stephen, do you know her? Heidi Lawalder. Famous harpist. I think she taught at Juilliard for a while. She's from Butte, Montana. Kick in the pants. When I was a freshman in college at Montana State University 100 years ago, Frank and Tim will remember this, we did the Bozeman Symphony concerts in the Ellen Theater, right? And I had to play the harp part on a second piano because we didn't have harp in those days. She was doing the Hinastera harp concerto. And so the piano was just, the Ellen Theater is really a beautiful old theater built in 1919, 100 years ago. And we were crammed on the stage, and I was sitting kind of back in the wings. And she was standing there, and she was getting ready to walk out on the stage to play a very difficult piece of music, the Hinastera harp concerto. And I was sitting right next at my little piano, and she was getting ready to walk out. And she looked at me, and just before she had one foot out on the stage, she said, you know what? I don't know why I'm doing this. I should have been a plumber. And out the door she went. And she played the beans out of that concerto. She had courage, right? She had courage, directing your will to overcome self-doubts and fears. You have to walk out on that stage with your head up high and have that courage. Second thing you have to have is trust. Letting go of your desire to consciously control correctness. Letting go of your desire to consciously control correctness. Now we want to do that, don't we? Oh my God, I played a wrong note. How many times have you told your students, don't think about that? You know what Beethoven said about wrong notes? He said, I don't care if you play a wrong note, play it musically. My piano teacher in undergrad school, Charles Payne, always said, Kenneth, if you're going to play a wrong note, play it loud enough so everybody can hear it. I love it. Play it with conviction. All right? Don't sit there and go, oh my God, I played a B flat, I should have played a D. And then you sit there and you think about it for 20 minutes and then you're all over the place, right? And our students do this all the time. They do it all the time. So letting go of your desire to consciously control correctness. Now this next one, acceptance, is the biggie. Perceiving an outcome as is without any judgment as to good or bad. Perceiving an outcome as is, without any judgment as to good or bad. That's easier said than done. You walk off the stage and you feel like that was the worst performance of my life. And then you're depressed for days. I want to tell you a story about that. In my first incarnation teaching at Montana State University, I worked with a cellist. And we're going to get to this aspect in a little bit. And we did the Samuel Barber Sonata for Cello and Piano, which is a marvelous piece of music. He wrote it for his composition teacher. And he was like 21 years old when he wrote it. And it's incredibly difficult to play. But nonetheless, we did it. And she really didn't particularly like to rehearse. And with a piece of that magnitude, you rehearse. The ensemble, and it's not a very long piece, I think it's 10 minutes long. But the ensemble between the piano and the technical demands of the piece are really very, very difficult. We had 2 rehearsals and a dress rehearsal. And when we walked out and played it, the hall was full. And I was this before I knew all this stuff. So anyway, the performance happened. She was not very complimentary to me at all. And I felt, and this was all me, I felt very insecure. And I was very depressed. And so about 4 or 5 weeks later, I thought, you know what? I'm going to go listen to the recording of that piece, that performance. So I went and I listened to that performance, and I was blown out of the water of how fabulous it was. I couldn't believe how well I played. It didn't sound like me. You know, and the audience stood up afterwards and they're clapping and applauding and oh, you're just being nice. But it was good. But my perception was bad. And you can't do that to yourself. So you have to perceive an outcome as is without any judgment as to good or bad. And all of you out there that have done adjudicating, or judged competitions, like when I've judged MTNA competitions in other states, you have to pick a winner, a first, second, and third place. And I tell the kids all the time, you know what, you could all come in this room tomorrow and I could hear the same program and I would have a different set of winners. Your performance is a snapshot of that day. It's a picture, it's a photograph. And it could be better the next day. And a lot of it depends on how you are feeling. Today I'm not having a good day, or I'm having a great day. So you just have to let go of that judgment. Okay? So you must practice all of these aspects of performance mindset in preparation for a performance. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at the personality traits of the practicer, okay? Because this is very helpful. So think of your students, okay? Think of your students or think of yourself in this particular section, okay? So we have the perfectionist. They're great practicers, right? They bring in the practice mindset, but the thing is, they bring the practice mindset into the performance. So they're swimming upstream. They walk out there on the stage, they sit down at the piano. Okay, is my hand position right? Oh, I got a pedal here. Oh, I got to make sure I play. Mrs. So-and-so told me that my hands are, I need to make sure that my wrist doesn't move. I have to do this. Oh, I have to play loud here. Oh, that was too loud because she told me that in the last piano lesson. That's what their mind is doing constantly in the performance. And so when that starts happening and you start to become very analytical about that, where's the musicality going? It's going right out the window. So perfectionists to try to get them to get into the performance mindset is very difficult because they're wired this way. Now, here's true confessions. How many of you are perfectionists at the piano? Do you find that when you're in a performance situation that you have these difficulties of switching gears? I know, it's tough. The next personality trait is the artist. This is the cellist that I was talking to you about. They don't practice. They just play. Now, believe me, in my career, I have worked with a lot of musicians like this. Oh, let's do this. Let's do that. Fine. Are we going to practice? Oh, we only need one rehearsal. We'll be fine. And in the meantime, you're just absolutely inside coming apart at the seams. They overestimate their abilities on the stage. But guess what happens when they get on the stage? They start to practice. But they have a little bit of finesse because they practice artistically. So that can be frustrating, especially if you are a collaborative artist. Or if you have students. How many of you have students like this? It's like, Mrs. Holden, I want to play on the recital tomorrow. Well, Johnny, have you practiced your piece? Well, no, but it'll be fine. Or how many of you have had students that decided that they're going to go out and play in a public performance and they don't tell you? And then they come to their lesson next week. Oh, I played in the school talent show in front of 500 people. What did you play? And you've never even heard him play the piece. My dear, you have an artistic future ahead of you. Or not. But at any rate, so then the other personality trait is the underachiever. Now, in a way, they have the performance, they have a performance mindset in the sense, you know, they're thinking about all of those aspects I talked about in performance mindset. But they go into the practice mindset in performance. Why? Because they're not practicing enough. They just simply are not practicing enough. And those are very difficult people, students and collaborators to work with. They're just not, they're not prepared. They're not prepared at all. I went to a in-home recital not too long ago in Bozeman. There's a wonderful, wonderful architect from Prague and his wife, and they've turned their home into a concert hall. So they have all of these various performances, classical performances, it's the Seekin House, and jazz performances, and they have vocal ensembles. I mean, it's just really a beautiful setting. And I went there not too long ago, and there was a pianist and a cellist. They were doing a collaborative recital, but the pianist decided that he wanted to play a solo. So he played the entire Beethoven Sonata in C sharp minor, Sonata una quasi fantasia. We all know what that piece is. He played the whole thing and he was sight reading it. And it was hideous. The reviews in the New York Times were horrible. So there's the artist personality and the underachiever, okay? Then you have the performer. I think it's a misprint on the page. It's the performer, a true performer. They got it. They have that performance mindset when they sit down and play the piano. They have it all. There's in the moment. They're listening to the music. They're listening to the artistry. They're listening to the voicing of the piano. They're listening, they're feeling, they're expressing, and they are having a great time. That's where you want to be. And I'm here to tell you, you can get there. How many of you have been in that situation? Raise your hands. Isn't it euphoric? It really is euphoric. In 2006, my piano duo partner and I did a 90-minute recital in Carnegie Hall. And you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, this is, you know, the famous Carnegie Hall. How many people have played on that stage? And I remember we had toured the United States. We did about 9 concerts before we went to New York. And we walked up the stairs in the famous green room and the famous door. And the guy went to open up the stage door and I said, wait! And I looked at my duo partner and I told her, I said, now one thing that you have to understand, all we have to do now is walk out there and play the piano. That's all we got to do. We've done all the work. We've done everything. Let's just play the piano and have a good time. So he walked out on the stage, took our bows. I saw my mother and my 2 sisters sitting in the front row. And I said to myself, I can do this now. Sat down at the piano. I was nervous for 5 minutes. And after that, it was like having a party on the stage. And when the recital was getting over with, about 90 minutes later, I was starting to get sad. It's done. It's over with. You know? So it's euphoric when you get into that performance mindset. It's a high. It's a natural high. And I wish that would happen all the time. It takes practice. It really does. Because there are days you walk out on the stage and it's like, oh my God, am I going to get through this? It's reality, okay? Okay, so now how do we develop the performance mindset? Now, how do we develop trust, courage, and acceptance? How do we do that? Got to watch the time here. The first thing with trust is that it's really important. You've got to trust yourself. Let go of the conscious control over correctness and attend to the higher order of the aspects of performance. So let me read that again. Trust is the most important aspect of the performance mindset. Let go of the conscious control over correctness and attend to the higher order of the aspects of performance. What are the higher order of the aspects of performance? What would that be? Anybody have any idea? The musicality. The expression. Playing from your heart. What else? The communication. That's very good. It's the communication to the audience. The performer's connection to the audience, right? What else would be some descriptors of that? How about the composer? Channeling the composer. I think that's important too. So focusing on trusting yourself to do that. I used to play for a lot of vocalists when I was an undergraduate at Montana State University, a very fine vocal teacher, Lowell Hickman. And he used to say this to his students all the time. Let it go. Trust yourself. Trust yourself. Trust, 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 and trust. And you walk out on the stage and you're a little nervous. You don't want to do that. But if you have to let go of that. Now here's what happens. We have self 1 and we have self 2. Right? Some of us have self 3 and 4 and we have a great time. How are you today? Fine. So this again can be related to left brain and right brain. I'm sure you're all aware of that brain research, which started in the late 70s, early 80s. And what's so interesting now, there's so many scientists out there, brain scientists. There's one in Bozeman that I talk to a lot. He's retired now. We can study the brain now when the brain is alive. That's so exciting. And there's really an interesting study going on between brain and the music. And that's really a fascinating topic. But that's a conversation for another day. However, what happens, now correct me if I'm wrong, there's a part of the brain back here, corpus callosum? No, not corpus callosum. Thank you.
This is my presentation on Friday.
Oh, I'm doing a commercial for her. Cerebellum, right. So that thing's pretty strong. Now correct me if I'm wrong, that has the fight or flight response, correct?
The cerebellum is more the motor control.
Yes.
That's automatic.
Yes.
Fight or flight is the limbic system, the emotions.
Yes, right. So what happens is that then you become, well, we all know this. Let's say you're sitting in a room and you're just playing away and there's nobody there, right? You're just playing your heart out. Somebody walks in the room, what happens? So then the pituitary gland, if I'm not mistaken, activates and it tells the adrenal gland to start producing adrenaline. And then the cerebellum, would you say it was? The cerebellum then gets very active. Then you start criticizing everything you do, right? Because this thing is on overdrive. Oh my God, I'm shaking. My knees are shaking. Oh my God, my foot's too far down in the pedal. Oh, so-and-so's in the audience. What am I going to do? You know, my suit, my socks don't match. Right? This thing is just going berserk. So when that happens, you're not trusting yourself anymore. How many of you have played in performances like, okay, here comes that part. Oh no, here it comes. There's no way in God's green earth I'm going to be able to play that. I couldn't play it in my lesson last week. How the heck am I going to play it in front of these people? And you're just sitting there going on and, oh my God, here it comes. And you just throw your hands, right? You stop trusting, okay? You stop trusting. So when that happens, then you stop being a performer. When you get to the higher order of listening to the music and playing the piano in public, it has to be natural. Now I'm going to give you an example. So you're in your car, and I drive up to the parking spot, and you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to take my right hand off the steering wheel. I'm going to move it 90 degrees this way. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my left hand off the steering wheel, and I'm going to put 90 degrees down here. And then I'm going to move approximately 48 inches or whatever to press the button to turn the car off. And then I'm going to come back here, and then I'm going to take my left hand, and I'm going to go 36 degrees over here, and I'm going to unfasten the seat belt, and then I'm going to come up like this, and then I'm going to put it down like this. You're thinking about every single move, right? How many of your students and how have many of you done that playing the piano? You're thinking about everything. Have you ever heard the old cliche? He plays the piano, she plays the piano like rolling off a log. That's what it should be. Just sit down. That's why I told Liza that. All we got to do is play the piano. That is trust. You have to trust yourself to do that. So how do you train your trust? Well, we go back to the practice mindset. You got to practice right. You just can't go and play the piece 4 times. Oh, I'm ready to go. Although there are some people that can do that. So you got to practice correctly. And that's what all of you are experts in. Teaching your students how to practice correctly. And that is the issue that I find when I'm adjudicating. When I hear fabulous students play, it's a combination of several things. It's a combination of their talent, but it's also part of the great teaching that they're getting from their teacher. You can hear when a student is talented, but they don't have a good teacher. But you also can hear a really good student perform that has talent. It's like that student has a great teacher. So it's teaching our students how to practice correctly, which is another topic of conversation for another day. But that's how you develop trust. Because see, the thing is, if the student is learning well, practicing correctly, what are they going to see? Results. They can do it. I can do it. Then they begin to trust their abilities at the keyboard. If they're not taught well, a teacher isn't examining the technical aspects of the piece or the pedaling or whatnot, and they're having difficulties, then they begin not to trust their ability because it doesn't sound good. The students, they can pick up on that. I had a student once, this is a true story. I was at a district music festival, and the student came in and sat down and played and didn't finish the piece. And I thought to myself, well, why didn't you finish the piece? And they had given me a score, and the student played by memory. And I went down there, and I said, there's still 2 lines left of the piece. Did you not remember it? Oh, my teacher didn't turn the page. I didn't know there were 2 lines of music left. I'm serious. Don't any one of you ever do that. Turn the page. So the thing so then you teach your students how to drill correctly. I use this 80-20 rule. Have you ever used that? 80% drilling, 20% variable practice. Have you ever heard of that? This is a very effective way of practicing. Jane McGraw presented this at a conference once, a great pedagogue from University of Oklahoma, who just retired, by the way. She just retired. A sweet, lovely woman and an incredible pedagogue. So what the 80-20 rule is that you're drilling. You're going through a difficult section, okay? And you show your students how to do that. Okay, you drill, 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 drill. Then the variable practice is, okay, now since we've got this particular technical passage learned, let's get into it and let's get out of it. That's the variable practice. I had a student who was doing a Beethoven piano sonata. He's a physicist. He went home and he worked on one measure for 45 minutes, just like a robot. He went back to the beginning, the piece, he got to that one spot, and he crashed and burned. He went over the edge. And I said, you have to learn how to go into it and to get out of it. So that's the variable part of practicing. Practicing things in different rhythms. I mean, just mixing up the whole entire practice routine that's going to give you positive effects, okay? That, again, builds trust. Then when you get towards the performance, you switch it. There's only going to be 20% variable practice. No, excuse me, 20% drilling and 80% of the variable practicing. You don't want to be drilling and drilling and drilling and drilling and drilling until you walk out on the stage. That's terrifying. The other day we had a student recital at school and the monitor couldn't find the student. And she was in the practice room just, it's like, come on, you got to go out there and play. You don't know it by then, you know. Okay. And then the next thing is courage. How are we going to develop courage? Courage is facing the discomfort of performance and directing your will to overcome self-doubts and fears. Okay? So, Margaret, we're scheduled to do a little break, right? Did I go over time? I did. Do you want me to keep going and finish this, or do you want me to take it? Were we scheduled for a break? How does everybody feel? You want me to keep going? Okay, because we have some activities. Fasten your seatbelts. Is that all right? Okay, great. I'm decording myself. Well, at least it matches my suit. Pardon me. All right. So one of the ways that you can develop courage is to write what is called a performance script. Have you ever heard of that? Now, I've actually had students do this. And for these particular students, it worked very well for them. I have a student who's an advanced player who's going on to do a master's degree in piano, collaborative piano, and he does a performance script for every single piece that he works on. Okay? So, I'm going to show you what are the steps of writing a performance script. So, a performance script is a description of the sensations you experience when you are playing great. Now, I want to emphasize playing great. All right? Performance scripts are used to create a feeling of certainty and confidence about your performance. When done well, your performance script includes a vivid and rich description of sensations, sights, sounds, smell, and emotions, excitement, confidence, and enjoyment that you experience when you're playing your best. You should read this script 25 to 30 times before the performance, and this will develop your courage and also courage to trust. So in your handouts, who did I give that to? On the back side, you'll see this sentence. When I think of my very best performances, the aspects or qualities that really stick out and best describe my mental state are. You see where that is on the back page? Now just take a moment and fill that out. When I think of my very best performances, the aspect or qualities that really stick out and best describe my mental state are. Just think of a few. You don't have to get elaborate about that. Huh? Where did the extra handouts go? She's got it back there. Would anybody like to share what they wrote? Linda.
Well, when I'm really excited about the music and love it and want everyone to hear it, I think that's when I feel really good about it.
Okay.
I've done that.
Good. Good. That's very good. Anyone else? Yes. Kate.
It started when I was a little girl. I'd play and practice. And if something was right, I'd get duck bumps that would start here and go all the way around. And when
Wow.
I'm in the zone, those duck bumps come.
That's great. Let us clarify that it is not a duck. It is a goose. No, it's a goose, not a duck. That's fabulous. That's great. Anyone else want to share?
Joy, flow, focus, feeling the music. It's like maybe different than the last time I played it, but whatever I feel right now, that's how I'm playing
Good.
it. And feeling the audience too.
Yeah.
Feeling
Their energy. Their energy is very important. Never, ever, ever forget your audience. And you never, ever know who's going to be there. Huh? Yeah, but don't think about that. Don't think about that. Then you can have a mental breakdown after your performance when you feel, oh my God, so-and-so was there. Okay, so on the bottom line, the performance script, we're going to talk about key descriptors, okay? So you can fill these out. So the first one is the performance venue, all right? So let me read you an example of a performance script. Now this is a little flowery, so, but you know, the woman who wrote this, who is a string player, she's getting the point across, okay? So it's the venue. So think back to a place or venue where you love to perform. We all have that, don't we? A place where we really feel very comfortable about performing. What are the special sights, smells, and sounds you love about that place? Okay? Create a picture of the perfect day and venue in your mind's eye and describe it as vividly as you can. So this is what she wrote. The sun is shining, which makes the cold a little more bearable. How many of you have gone into freezing concert halls? I'm dressed in layers, so I'm keeping warm. I enter the old concert hall, and it smells of aged wood and old carpet. The carpet is bright red. I walk into the performance space, and it is totally empty. The light is bright, and the wood glistens in the light. All the large wooden doors are closed. I'm amazed by the silence, and I embrace it. So that's a very vivid description of this particular performer's favorite concert hall. And then the next thing is, what do you feel like during the pre-performance warm-up? So you're at the performance. Nobody's in the hall yet, but you got to go out there and warm up. How do you feel? Describe how you want to feel and think during your on-site warm-up. Include how great it is to be where you are and the feeling of being prepared. That's the most important. Everything is going great in the warm-up, and you are feeling just the way you want to before the performance. This is what she wrote. I like my hands to feel relaxed, to feel just the right amount of friction on the bow and strings, my shoulders feeling relaxed and free. I feel the enjoyment from each note and tone color coming from the instrument. To feel excited about the performance, my fingers feeling warm and nimble. So she's saying, you know, she's very physically, very relaxed. Okay? Then what do you feel like at the beginning of the performance? So you've walked out on the stage, you've taken your bow, you're sitting down at the piano, and you're playing. So that's what you want to think about. What are you feeling? What would you like to feel at the beginning of the performance? You know, describe what it feels like to get off to a great start. What are the mental and physical elements needed for a great beginning of your performance? Draw from past great starts and describe the feelings. Illustrate how great it is to feel confident and relaxed, yet energized. That's important. Describe how well you execute your technique with composure and how your confidence starts to build as your performance continues. So this is what she wrote. I like to hear the grumble of the crowd from backstage. So you're back in the wings and you can hear everybody out there. Their applause as I walk out on the stage. Don't you just love applause? They're fabulous. The smell of the rosin dust in the air and the feel of the rosin on my fingers. To feel the energy in the air around me. To hear how resonant my cello is in the hall. To feel a full range of motion in both of my hands. To feel extremely open in my playing, full of depth of sound, to feel free to take risks in performance. To feel very warm, energized by the music. That's artistry. That is true artistry. When you can take those risks, you feel so comfortable. Sometimes it just happens. And you do it, and it's like, oh, that sounded really good. I think I'm going to keep that. You know? Again, trusting and listening to the higher orders of performance. Okay? What do you feel like during intermission? I'm leaving and never coming back. What are the feelings you want to have during intermission? I remember when we were in Carnegie Hall, in the green room, they had a microphone, they had a speaker system, and we could hear everybody in the audience. And I said, turn that thing off. That was making me really nervous, because we could hear everything. But at intermission, we could hear, they turned it back on, and we could hear what people were saying about us. It was all positive. So during intermission, I like to feel calm and in control, relaxed and not rushed, to take time to reconnect with my cello, to return and hear the start of each movement with solid tempos and mood, to feel prepared and to explore the music when I return for the second half, to refocus myself before I leave again for the hall. Okay? So you get yourself, your mind back into that performance mindset during the intermission. And then what do you feel like in the middle of the performance? You know, imagine a perfect performance. Everything is working. You're focused and you're relaxed. Nothing is bothering you. You're flowing and letting it go. It's a great feeling to be so positive about all aspects of your performance. You're connecting with your audience, which is so important. It all seems so effortless and natural. And so she says, as I walk back on stage, I like to feel full of energy, to hear a much bigger applause in the anticipation of the second half. You know you've done a good job if you walk out in the second half and they're applauding very vigorously, right? If they don't, that's a topic for another day. To hear the clear tone of my instrument as it reverberates throughout the hall, I love the sound. This is why I play. To feel that ease of sound full to its full potential. To feel I can shape it in countless ways to express myself through the music. To listen to what the composer sets forth in his or her music. That's important too. To hear things that I've never heard before. That's a wonderful experience, if it's good. To try things slightly differently, to play more freely, to make the music sound almost improvised because it's coming so naturally from me. And when you get it, and we talked about this earlier, when you get to that level, it's a natural high. And I wish we could do that all the time. Now, I'm here to tell you, if you are a performer that's performing all the time, the easier it gets. Because you do all this stuff. If you're performing constantly, you don't get nervous. The energy is transformed differently. It's an excitement. The energy is still there. But you're not nervous. You know how to control the nerves. You know how to channel that energy into a much more positive way because you're used to it. If you don't have that energy, then you have problems. And you really do. So that will really help you to develop courage and trust. Now, in terms of acceptance, which is the non-judgmental aspect of performing, perceiving the outcome as is without any judgment as good or bad, what you can do is you can implement what is called a focus plan. And the focus plan looks like this on the back. This funny looking little chart down here. Okay? Focus plans are a map of your attentional targets during performance. Okay? You're mapping out where you want your conscious mind, self one, or the left brain, to go during various sections of your performance. This increases the likelihood of your conscious mind, or that your conscious mind will not shift or drift inappropriately. Developing a focus plan is a technique used in a variety of performance domains to help the performers identify how best to focus and refocus during their performances. Focus plans provide an at a glance visual understanding of your performance piece and allows you the opportunity to pre-plan and practice desirable attentional shifts. Now, what that means is that if you see on that performance script, is that this particular performer is playing a Kodai sonata, and they mapped it out in the exposition. Now this would be the form of the piece, the development, and the recapitulation. And I've had students do this as well. What it does is it keeps this thing back here, it gives it a job, and it keeps it working in a positive way and not a negative way. So, at the very beginning of the piece, she wrote in a circle, which means deep breaths, focus energy, and center. That's before she even plays a note. And then the letter A, a very authoritative, bold, and strong opening in the piece. Measure 9, I'm going to be bold and I'm going to play with a forward-looking and a forward-moving line. In measure 20, I'm going to have a brief pause. I'm going to go out of tempo. I'm going to enjoy the moment. Okay? And then, this obviously must be, well, I guess it isn't, but measure 32, a quiet, meditative, searching line, quasi-improvised sound. So you're thinking of all of these descriptors about the piece, right? And so you're thinking about that when you're playing. And sometimes people think about it a lot, and sometimes people just think about it briefly. They're just checking in and out. Or I had a teacher once who said, you know, during the performance, just check to see if your pedaling is right, but don't focus on it. If it's okay, then leave. Your voicing, how's your voicing? It's wonderful. Leave. How's my hand position? It's great. Don't think about it. That's where you have to trust and you have to keep going, okay? And then what happens is that you're able to focus on those higher levels of musicality. And you're not thinking critically. You're performing. You're becoming an artist. You're being an artist. And I used to do this when I was in high school, and I didn't even know about this, but I just did it. And then Dr. Moore was able to verbalize it, and he was able to write it in. So, for example, if you want to hear what I might do in this particular Chopin nocturne, I had to steal the score from the exhibitor, don't tell him. I'll give it back. This is the famous C-sharp minor posthumous nocturne that he wrote for his sister and told her to practice it before she practiced his F minor piano concerto, because there's a quote of the piano concerto in the nocturne. And he never published it. Her husband published it about 40 years after Chopin died. And Ludwika, his sister, was deceased at that time too. Chopin never titled it Nocturne. It didn't have a title. The publisher at the time titled it Nocturne. So it starts out, and I always tell my students this, that one of the biggest influences of Chopin's music, his composition, I should say, is that he was so much influenced by two major, one composer, which was J.S. Bach, and also the human voice. Chopin said that the perfect instrument was the human voice. And when he moved to Paris in 1831, he was known to go to the opera 5 nights a week. And so what he loved about the operatic compositional traits of the time was the bel canto style of singing, the bell-like singing. So you had a beautiful florid line, or a beautiful florid vocal part, which was usually in the high female voice, coloratura, soprano, and the high male voice, the tenor, with a very simple orchestral accompaniment underneath it. It was an expressive device. Chopin was fascinated with that. And what he did is he incorporated it into his piano music. And people say, well, if he loved the human voice so much, why did he not write an opera? Because he wasn't an opera composer. He composed for this, the piano. So this is full of operatic influences. So the introduction would be a recitative. So I would write that in my description as a bold statement in the beginning, capture the audience's attention, then on the repeat, I soften it because something's going to happen. The soprano comes and sings her aria. So then she sings. Okay? In walks in maybe a different character now or a different mood. Okay? Things are a little more happier. Now the brooding tenor comes in. Now here's the piano concerto quote. That's Chopin. So I was thinking about Chopin, George Sand, Victor Hugo, Paris, 1831. I was channeling the composer. I was thinking about all those things, the nuances of the piece, the different characters. I wasn't thinking about any note. I wasn't thinking about any pedal. I wasn't thinking about any hand position. Although that run could have been a little better. Now I'm accepting it. I'm accepting it as is. Right?
Yes, you are.
I want to be a plumber. I was teaching 2 students that were doing a joint recital. And you know how it is getting students ready for a recital and performance, right? It's a lot of work. And I was having a bad day. And I made the mistake of saying to them I should have been a plumber. Well, the recital happened 3 or 4 weeks later. And it was hugs and kisses, everything was fine. Yeah, hugs and kisses, everything's wonderful. We had a party afterwards. You know, their families are there and this and that and everything else. And they came up to me and they said, "We want to give you a present." And I was so touched. You didn't have to do that. They said, "You have to open it." And of course, every phone in that room was, yeah. And I opened it up and guess what it was? A plumber's belt. So, the performance phase of the performance mindset: approach with courage, execute with trust, and respond with acceptance. Okay? So that is the gist of my talk today. If you want to read a little bit more about this, you can go online, and Dr. Moore has written this workbook and also this textbook, which I've read from cover to cover. And he gives you all of these ideas. There's another book I didn't bring today, but it's a journal. Okay? So you can even do some journaling. You can write things down. And I find it to be very, very useful. He coaches not only pianists, but he coaches, what did he tell me? We were in the elevator one day having a great conversation about this, and he said, "I coach people that have to be perfect in very tense situations." Performers are like that, right? He coaches performers. He coaches Olympic athletes. He coaches surgeons. He coaches SWAT team people, police officers. So all of this is interdisciplinary in the sense that it affects everyone who has to, as I mentioned, you have to be perfect under pressure. So this is a little bit on how you play your best when it counts. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, could you go back and give us the definition of courage again?
You eat a can of spinach. No. Courage. Directing your will to overcome self-doubts and fears. Madam President, am I on time? A few more moments for questions. Any other questions? Oh, come on. You got to have some questions.
I like your stories.
You didn't like the presentation? No, I'm accepting it as is.
I think that gives us the idea of good presentation.
Well, you have to illustrate it.
Yes.
You have to illustrate it. You do. You know, and it's like too, you know, when I finished the Chopin, I was pausing, but I was letting the music settle, which is very important because it's still a communication to you. We had this student at MSU years ago. She was 5'2". She didn't have eyes of blue. Stephen Hess was rubbing off on me, I can tell. She was this little thing. Her name was Crystal. God bless her, she was just as skinny as this finger. And she could play that piano like, she would come out in student recitals. I mean, she was just this little twig. And she'd come out, very mousy. She'd sit down and, she was just, then she played the last chord. And the audience started clapping and she would run off the stage. Crystal, honey, we got to work on your stage department. The audience is going, wait, come back. Any other questions?
I was going to say, along those lines, I used to have my students, if they were getting ready for a competition or something, that we would walk them through the entire thing from the beginning to end.
Excellent.
More than once.
And that was one thing I forgot. They're going to take my license away from me for forgetting this. Have your students, and I know all that, I'm speaking to a room full of fabulous teachers. Have your students practice performing. Yeah, have them practice that. I'll say, when I was at MSU the first time, I would say, you, and you in my office right now. It's like, oh my God, what did I do? And they'd get in there and I'd shut the door. Now sit down. What did I do? I said, your job is to make me nervous. And I'd play for them. I'd play for them. So get your friends to come in and have you play, and then you can practice the performance. Now, here's another thing you can do. I'm just going to give you some tools here. Your heart's racing, your hands are sweaty, right? And you got to deal with that. So how do you do that? How do you practice that? I had a teacher who did this. She made her students do this. Go outside and run around the block. And you come in, your heart's going, you're out of breath. Now sit down and play. Okay. Yes. And you want to know if you do, so what if you don't have people that you can draw to come in and listen to you play? You want to know what the most terrifying thing in the world is, at least for me? A microphone. I would rather play in front of 5,000 people than have to sit there and play for that bloody microphone. But don't listen to your recording. Just let it make you nervous. So those are some great things. Yes. Yes. Who? Oh, Carol.
Even if they're not playing the program they are prepared for, just play.
Yes. You're absolutely right. Yeah. If they can do any performance experience, that helps. Yeah. And I'm going to play in church this Sunday, or I'm going to play, for the Senior Citizen Center, or the school talent show. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I've been trying to encourage kids to record their performances at home when they're getting ready.
Yeah.
With phones.
Yes.
They have that excuse. And they usually come back and say, I thought I knew it better.
Yep.
I was performing it, And so it's good because they're starting to hear what I've been telling them.
Yes.
They think that they're
And that's true.
phrasing, and they're like, you're right, I need to be a little more exaggerated in that
Yeah.
spot. And they think they're doing it.
Yeah.
But until they hear it back.
Yeah.
I can show them what I'm hearing, but until they see themselves and watch, they're like, oh, you're right on those things. So it's just a great way to utilize their phones.
It really is, and that is a good thing to do. And you know what another thing is, when they record the performances, and then after the performance is over with, maybe 2 weeks down the road, then listen to it. When I was working with my duo partner, we did that all the time, and that was one of the best coachings that we ever had, because then you're in the performance situation, And are we doing the things that we work so hard to do? It's like, ooh, the balance wasn't as good there as we thought it was. So we have to fine-tune the ear, and we have to listen for that phrasing. My teacher in graduate school did the same thing, Dennis Alexander, and he recorded every single lesson. And I'd be sitting in there working on a Beethoven sonata, and he would say, "You're not articulating that right." "Yes, I am." "No, you're not." "Yes, I am." I'd get mad. So then he would say, "I'll prove it to you." And he would go to the tape recorder, and he would turn it off, and he would rewind it. "Now listen to that." "All right." Oh. He was right.
That's the other thing with my students, I always tell them to make sure they listen to it. Because if they didn't like what they did, they don't want to listen.
Yeah.
After they recorded it,
Yeah.
they started on another
Yeah.
recording.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bill Moore, I mean, I saw the same place that you did.
Yes.
It's phenomenal. And I thought it was interesting because when we talked afterwards,
Uh-huh.
his comment was, I never thought of applying it to performing artists until Jim McGraw.
That's right.
She saw him give it, because he works with the NIA athletic league.
Yeah, he worked for the athletics. Yeah.
Particularly football players.
Yeah.
And we all deal with the soccer team and the basketball team and the football team at the high school and the school level. And somehow, if you can apply what he said for the athletics to what they're doing in the music, they pretty soon start to realize it's one and the same.
That's a very good point. And I forgot that, and that's true. And a couple years ago, I was at the GP3 conference in the Cincinnati Conservatory. They had a linebacker coach from the Cincinnati Bengals come in, and he talked to this room full of musicians about how they practice. Now, here's me. I just thought they walked out on the field and just, you know. And he's talking about how they practice these drills, and he was using the same terminology that we use as teachers. And I was fascinated. I said, "You do that?" So you're right. Yeah.
I make a point of watching the 10 o'clock news so I can watch all the universities, both universities, teams practicing. Because then somehow every week that incident comes up. Well, when I watch the Cats do such and such in the middle of the winter, it's no different than you doing this arpeggio, whatever the case is.
Well, you're right. And you know what Dennis used to have us do during the Olympic times? He would make us watch the figure skating competitions. Now watch their technique. Watch their artistry. So there's a lot of parallel there. Are we done? Thank you.